Hello, and welcome to the LM Podcast. Hi, everyone. We're so happy you are here with us today. This is the best place to learn and practice your English step by step. Today, we are going to learn how to get an American accent through everyday communication. Many English learners want to sound more natural when speaking English, especially with an American accent. Developing an American accent does not mean changing your identity or forgetting your culture. Instead, it means learning how Americans pronounce words, connect sounds, use rhythm, and communicate naturally in everyday situations. One of the best ways to improve pronunciation and accent is through real conversations. Instead of memorizing grammar rules only, learners should practice authentic communication that people use every day at school, at work, in restaurants, or with friends. Listening carefully and repeating native speakers can help learners sound smoother, clearer, and more confident. American English is usually relaxed, connected, and rhythmic. Native speakers often shorten words, connect sounds together, and stress important words in a sentence. For example, Americans usually say gonna instead of going to, wanna instead of want to, and did ya instead of did you. These small pronunciation changes make speech sound more natural and fluent. Imagine two Chinese students studying at an American international school. Their names are Kevin and Jason. Both of them are trying to improve their English speaking skills and sound more American. Every day, they practice speaking together during class breaks, lunchtime, and after school. Their conversations help them become more comfortable using English naturally. One morning before class, Kevin walks into the classroom and sees Jason sitting at his desk looking tired. Kevin says, "Hey, Jason, what's up?" In fast American speech, "What's up?" often sounds like "What's up?" Jason replies, "Not much, man. I'm kinda tired today." Instead of saying kind of, Americans usually pronounce it as kinda. For real. These kinds of expressions are extremely common in everyday American communication. Here is a dialogue on how to develop an American accent between two Chinese students talking at school. Kevin and Jason are Chinese international students studying at an American high school. Jason wants to improve his American accent, and Kevin has already practiced for several years. During lunch break, they sit together outside the school library and talk about how to sound more natural in English.
Hey,
Not
Jason.
much, man.
What's up?
I'm kinda tired today.
Jason, I noticed that your English pronunciation has improved a lot recently. And honestly, you sound much more confident than before when you first came to this school. Because back then you spoke very slowly and carefully, but now your speech sounds smoother and more natural.
Really? I'm actually very happy to hear that because I've been trying to improve my American accent every single day, especially by listening carefully to native speakers and repeating the way they pronounce words, connect sounds together, and use intonation in normal conversations.
Yeah, I can definitely hear the difference, because your rhythm sounds more American now, and you don't sound like you are translating from Chinese in your head anymore when you speak English during class discussions or casual conversations with friends.
That's exactly what I've been practicing lately, because I realized that having an American accent is not only about pronouncing individual words correctly, but also about speaking with natural rhythm, connected speech, and relaxed pronunciation like native speakers do every day.
That's true. And one thing I learned from watching American TV shows is that native speakers rarely pronounce every word clearly and separately the way English learners often do in textbooks, because Americans usually connect words together and reduce sounds naturally while speaking fast.
Yeah, I noticed that too, especially when Americans say things like, "Did you eat yet?" Because it sounds more like, "Did ya eat yet?" And at first I honestly couldn't understand anything they were saying because the pronunciation sounded completely different from what I learned in school.
I had the same problem when I first arrived in America, because I studied grammar for many years in China, but I almost never practiced listening to authentic conversations. So when native speakers talked naturally, I felt lost most of the time during conversations.
Exactly. And I think many English learners focus too much on grammar rules instead of pronunciation and listening practice, which is why they can read English well but still struggle to communicate naturally with native speakers in real situations.
So, what have you been doing recently to improve your accent so quickly? Because honestly, your pronunciation sounds much more relaxed and American compared to last semester?
Well, every morning before class I spend around 20 minutes shadowing native speakers from podcasts and interviews. And I try to copy not only their pronunciation, but also their emotion, rhythm, stress, and even their breathing patterns while speaking.
That's actually a very effective method, because shadowing trains your ears and mouth at the same time. And after enough repetition, your brain slowly becomes familiar with the natural patterns of American English pronunciation.
Yeah, and at first it felt really embarrassing because I sounded strange when I copied native speakers too closely, but after a few weeks I became more comfortable. And eventually I started speaking more naturally without thinking too much about every single word.
I think confidence is also very important, because many English learners are afraid of making mistakes, so they speak too slowly and carefully, which actually makes their pronunciation sound less natural than it could be.
That's true, and I realized that native speakers don't speak perfectly all the time either, because they pause, repeat words, use slang, and sometimes even make grammar mistakes in casual conversations. But they still sound fluent because their rhythm and pronunciation are natural.
Exactly. And another thing that helped me improve my American accent was learning sentence stress. Because in American English, people usually stress important words.
Yeah,
while
I noticed
reducing
that when
smaller
Americans say
words
something
to,
like, I'm gonna go to the store
and
later,
during
they
conversations.
stress words like go and store, but the other words become softer and shorter, which creates that smooth American rhythm.
Right, and learners who pronounce every word equally often sound robotic, even if their grammar is correct, because English is a stress-time language and the rhythm is extremely important for sounding natural.
One thing I still struggle with sometimes is the American R sound, especially in words like world, girl, and morning, because those sounds don't really exist in Chinese pronunciation, so my tongue position still feels awkward occasionally.
I understand that completely, because the American R sound is difficult for many international students. But honestly, your pronunciation is already much better now, because I can hear stronger and clearer R sounds when you speak.
Thanks, man. I've been practicing by reading paragraphs aloud every night and recording my voice on my phone, because listening to myself helps me notice pronunciation mistakes that I usually don't realize while speaking.
That's actually one of the best ways to improve quickly, because many learners never hear their own pronunciation objectively, so they repeat the same mistakes for years without noticing them.
Yeah, and I've also started watching more American YouTubers and interviews instead of only studying from textbooks, because real conversations teach me expressions and pronunciation patterns that people actually use in daily life.
That's a smart idea, because textbooks often teach formal English, but native speakers usually speak much more casually in real conversations with friends, classmates, or co-workers.
For example, Americans often say things like, I'm starving, no way, that's awesome, or I'm kinda tired. And those expressions make conversations sound much more natural and relaxed.
Exactly. And once you start using those expressions naturally together with connected speech and proper rhythm, your English immediately sounds more American, even if you still make small grammar mistakes sometimes.
I think the biggest lesson I learned is that improving an American accent takes consistency and patience, because pronunciation doesn't improve overnight, but daily practice slowly changes the way you speak over time.
That's completely true, because language learning is like going to the gym. If you practice a little every day, your speaking muscles gradually become stronger and more natural without you even noticing it immediately.
Honestly, I still have a long way to go before sounding completely fluent, but compared to last year, I feel much more comfortable speaking English with classmates and teachers without feeling nervous all the time.
And that confidence is one of the biggest signs of improvement, because when people stop worrying too much about mistakes, they begin speaking more naturally and communicating more effectively.
Yeah, and my goal now is not to sound perfect, but to communicate clearly, naturally, and confidently while continuing to improve my pronunciation little by little every day.
Well, honestly, you're already doing a great job, and if you continue practicing consistently like this, I'm sure your American accent will become even more natural in the future.
Thanks, Kevin. Hearing that really motivates me to keep practicing every single day.
The conversation between Kevin and Jason is mainly about improving an American accent through daily English practice, confidence, listening, and communication. Both students are Chinese international students studying in an English-speaking environment, and they are discussing their experiences learning to sound more natural in American English. Throughout the conversation, Kevin notices that Jason's pronunciation and speaking ability have improved significantly compared to the past. This shows how regular practice and consistent exposure to English can gradually change the way a learner speaks. The dialogue reflects a very realistic situation that many English learners experience when they study abroad or communicate regularly with native speakers. At the beginning of the conversation, Kevin compliments Jason by saying that his English sounds more natural and confident than before. This part demonstrates the importance of progress in language learning. Often, learners do not notice their own improvement because change happens slowly over time. However, other people can hear the difference more clearly. Kevin explains that Jason's speech no longer sounds overly careful or robotic. Instead, it sounds relaxed and conversational, which is one of the key characteristics of an American accent. In real American English communication, native speakers usually speak smoothly and naturally rather than pronouncing every word separately. Kevin's compliment encourages Jason and gives him more motivation to continue practicing English every day. Jason responds by explaining that he has been practicing consistently after school. He mentions shadowing, listening to podcasts, and watching American TV shows. This part of the conversation teaches an important language learning strategy called shadowing. Shadowing means listening carefully to native speakers and immediately repeating exactly what they say with the same pronunciation, rhythm, intonation, and emotion. This method helps learners improve their accent because it trains both listening and speaking skills at the same time. Jason explains that he does not only focus on vocabulary or grammar, he also pays attention to how native speakers connect words, reduce sounds, and use natural rhythm in conversations. This reflects how real fluency develops through imitation and repeated exposure to authentic English communication. Another major idea in the conversation is rhythm and connected speech. Kevin explains that American English is not spoken word by word in a stiff manner. Instead, native speakers connect sounds together naturally. For example, Americans often say gonna instead of going to, wanna instead of want to, and did ya instead of did you. Jason mentions that at first, he could not understand these expressions because they sounded completely different from textbook English. This is a common challenge for many English learners. In school, students often learn formal grammar and clear pronunciation, but in real-life native speakers use reduced speech and casual expressions constantly. The conversation highlights the importance of learning authentic spoken English rather than depending only on textbooks. The dialogue also discusses confidence in speaking English. Jason says that at first he felt embarrassed when he copied native speakers closely because he thought he sounded strange or unnatural. This feeling is very common among language learners. Many people are afraid of making mistakes, being judged, or sounding silly when practicing pronunciation. However, Kevin encourages him and explains that confidence is extremely important for sounding natural. Learners who are too nervous often speak slowly, pause too much, and overthink every sentence. As a result, their English sounds less fluent. Once learners relax and focus more on communication instead of perfection, their speech becomes smoother and more natural. This part of the conversation teaches learners that confidence and practice are more important than trying to sound perfect immediately. Another important topic discussed in the dialogue is the difference between learning grammar and learning communication skills. Kevin says that many students in China can achieve high grammar scores but still struggle to communicate naturally with native speakers. This happens because grammar knowledge alone does not automatically create speaking fluency. Real communication requires listening comprehension, pronunciation, rhythm, vocabulary usage, and social confidence. Jason agrees and explains that many learners study English for years but rarely practice speaking in realistic situations. The conversation suggests that learners should spend more time using English actively through conversation practice, listening activities, and speaking exercises rather than only memorizing grammar rules. Recording one's own voice is another useful learning strategy discussed in the conversation. Jason says he records himself speaking English and listens carefully to identify mistakes. This is an excellent self-improvement technique because learners often do not notice their pronunciation errors while speaking. By listening to recordings, they can compare their speech with native speakers and identify areas that need improvement. Kevin agrees and says many learners continue repeating the same mistakes for years simply because they never hear themselves objectively. This section of the conversation emphasizes the importance of self-awareness in language learning. The conversation also explains how native speakers communicate casually in daily life. Kevin mentions that native speakers do not always speak perfectly. They pause, repeat words, use slang, shorten expressions, and sometimes even make grammar mistakes. However, they still sound fluent because their rhythm, pronunciation, and communication flow naturally. This idea is very important for English learners because many students incorrectly believe that fluency means speaking perfectly without mistakes. In reality, fluency means communicating comfortably, naturally, and confidently. Jason realizes this and says he stopped trying to sound perfect all the time. Instead, he focuses on speaking clearly and confidently during real conversations. Toward the end of the dialogue, Kevin compares language learning to going to the gym. He explains that practicing a little every day gradually strengthens speaking ability over time. This comparison teaches the importance of consistency. Accent improvement does not happen overnight. Instead, daily habits such as listening, shadowing, speaking aloud, watching American media, and practicing conversations slowly train the brain and mouth to produce more natural English sounds. Jason feels encouraged because he can now communicate more comfortably with classmates and teachers without feeling as nervous as before. Finally, the conversation ends on a positive and motivational note. Kevin tells Jason that his improvement is very noticeable and that with continued practice, he may eventually sound like someone who has lived in America for a long time. Jason feels proud and motivated because his hard work is producing visible results. This ending highlights one of the most important messages of the entire conversation. Successful language learning comes from patience, consistency, confidence, and daily communication practice. Overall, this conversation is a realistic example of how English learners can develop an American accent naturally through exposure, imitation, repetition, and confidence building. It teaches practical pronunciation strategies, highlights common learner challenges, and encourages students to practice authentic communication every day. The dialogue also demonstrates that fluency is not about perfection but about speaking naturally, clearly, and confidently in real-life situations. Thanks for listening, and keep practicing with us. Have a good day.